The following episode may contain spoilers for the life of Gaz. Our usual recording situation changed slightly, so you may experience a slight change in quality as we continue to learn the best way to record and produce this podcast. Welcome to episode 10 of our board game podcast, A Master's Degree in Rolling Terribly. 10. A milestone I wasn't sure we were going to hit, but here we are, 10 episodes in. I've actually mentioned to close friends and family that we actually have started this podcast, right? And when people wanted to listen to it, to actually hear it, I had to warn them that it's kind of a niche podcast, and look, it's about a hobby, right? So that's already going to be somewhat niche. And then it's about board games. And then it's about one particular board game. And they're probably not going to understand it. But so many people have been wanting to support it, which has been really, really, really nice. And of course, a lot of people are like, why would you make something so niche? So we've actually been really surprised at the support and love that our podcasts, Dirt, A Master's Degree in Rolling Terribly, have been receiving over the 10 episodes. And we've really been enjoying a lot of the discussions about a game that we love so much. So this episode, we decided to mix things up with this milestone episode by delving a little into one half of the podcast by interviewing our beloved Geminate and my very close friend, Gaz. For the 10th time, can you please say hi, Gaz?
Hi, Gaz. And I didn't think I was getting an introduction then. I thought you had just decided to go off on this tangent, and I was going to say, this is going to be super awkward when you ask me a question, and 5 minutes in when you realise I'm here as well.
Yeah, well, you had to be. We decided, we did play this week, so we actually have a second episode coming out around the same time as this one, but for this milestone one, I wanted to take this chance to maybe have a little bit of a chat about yourself. A lot of podcasts tend to start off with fairly heavy introductions to the host and their backgrounds and what they do. We kind of jumped straight into it, and I wanted to give the listeners the chance to get to know you a little bit better, but also you are our Geminate, and maybe to get some of your thoughts and opinions about how you've been enjoying that particular class.
Yeah, well, I think at the start, we didn't think we were interesting enough to do a whole podcast on. That's why we chose Frosthaven, because it has a lot more fans than we do. So hopefully this will be interesting enough and people will enjoy listening to us. And yeah, to give us a bit of an insight. I won't talk too much about myself, but I think it came up, this idea, because I was kind of talking about, we did like a mini debrief after the last session. I was just talking about the Geminate, where it's sitting, how I'm enjoying it, and the ups and downs and stuff like that. So yeah, it'll be a good chance to talk through some of that stuff in a bit more detail.
Absolutely.
By the end, you might actually understand how the class works.
You mean me?
Yeah, you.
No,
yes.
No. All I hear is, oh, I got to switch. Oh, I don't have that element up. Oh, no, I'm out of cards. Well, no. Well, this is not a hating episode. I'm sitting here loving you, so don't turn it into that.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, next time, I'll just borrow a Crushing Weight, equip that, and then win, right? Like, that's...
That's pretty much. My episode will be really short. So, Gaz, if you could give everyone a brief history about your experiences with tabletop games.
Yeah, tabletop games. So, I actually started when Catan was kind of first around. And, first around, I say that in Australia, so it was probably 10 years after it came out.
Yeah.
For those unaware of where Australia is, we're almost on a different planet in regards to how long it takes things to get here. And so releases, tend to be long and delayed. But yeah, games like Catan was a really, really big one. Those really basic ones. And I think the one that I really got into was Stone Age, which is a worker placement game. And that's kind of what kicked off that side of things. I think prior to those type of games, I had played CCGs. So like Magic the Gathering, played Pokemon a bit when I was a kid. When it actually very first came out, I remember buying the Pokemon cards. I actually still got them, and I'm like, oh yeah, these cards. So yeah, that's kind of my my background as an adult, and I think I mentioned it on the first cast very briefly actually, but when I was like a very young kid, I played Hero Quest when it first came out, which has actually been re-released, which I think
You
is
still have a
hilarious.
copy, don't you?
I do. I do still have a copy. I've still got
Have your copy. Is it complete?
It is complete, yeah. Although I never got the expansions. It was something I never had. So it's complete as the edition is, but not with the expansions. And another game called Dark World, which came before it, which was interesting. Had a bit of a castle that you would shake this thing. I don't know. It's a whole bunch of stuff.
Dark Tower?
Pardon? Nah, Dark World.
Tower? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Never heard of that one.
And Space Crusade, which was after Hero Quest. So that was kind of like the Warhammer 40k, I think, gateway board game, because it was you controlled a group of Space Marines and you fought against the aliens and Gretchens, which are the goblins and stuff like that. So yeah, so I played those games a lot when I was a kid, but then yeah, probably more recently as an adult was starting at things like Catan.
And then I know that you've also dabbled a little bit, like maybe just very lightly, in tabletop miniatures games as well.
Yeah, I think I collected Warhammer Fantasy for a really long time, never really played it, and only briefly painted it. I also did the same thing with Warhammer 40k, again, never really played it. But of recent times, I've started playing, not at the moment, but I did play Star Wars Legion, which is a Star Wars tabletop miniature game. And I got fairly into that, and actually from that started actually painting. So that's probably the one that I've played the most.
So I want to know what kind of mechanics and I guess style of game would you say, after years of doing all of this and playing, you know, all the various different games, is there a type of style of game that you have a preference over?
Yeah, it's really tricky. I really like, to move away from style of games, so I'm not going to really answer your question. I'm going to do the politician thing and just talk and not really do it. But I really like cards. So I like the feel of cards. I like deck building aspects to that. But I also really enjoy dice. So I think the randomness and those elements in games I quite like when they're in, but they can be done poorly, and so it's not. I won't say I like every game with cards or I like every game with dice. So I tend to favor these days towards, because we play with bigger groups. So
Yes.
you know, I like the bigger games that are more. I don't like using the word immersive, because I think like any game you play the feeling can be immersive. But the ones that kind of have a bit more story going for them, like, you know, again, we've played a bit is Nemesis, always have a great time with that. We played Station 4, which kind of had the same type of thing. You know, we've played Twilight Imperium a bit, where you kind of get these narratives. So I wouldn't say they're the games that I like playing, but I think in more recent time, in the last few years, it's those games that we can have 4 or 5 people and really kind of all be part of the same game.
So the game kind of tells a story?
Yeah. I think the player interaction in some element is what's really important, and it doesn't have to be attacking each other. Like when I would first play games, it was always like, oh, does this have combat mechanic in it? And I think I've steered away from that now. One, because most combat mechanics tend to suck in games. Like, it's really tricky for a combat mechanic between player versus player to be good, and not just kind of be the well, it's better if I don't attack, right? So there are some exceptions to that, which, you know, I do enjoy. But I think that the games that are like a tableau builder, head down, bum up, and just I'll come out at the end and go, hey, I win, they're the ones that I don't enjoy as much, especially when they're lengthy. I like the puzzle part of it, but I'm not playing games to play a puzzle. Like, I could do my own puzzles. So I think these days I'm more going for the social element, and the games that you're all up in each other's kind of space and stuff like that tend to be a bit more enjoyable.
Could you maybe give the listeners maybe a top 3 games you've ever played, and maybe a brief description of why you love those choices? Yeah,
so I guess in no particular order, and not top 3 games I've ever played, but like just games that come to mind when I think of things that I had a lot of fun playing, and probably quite a lot. One of them is I'm going to go completely off all of the things I just said, right? Okay. Just because that's the way. And firstly, bring up a card game called Star Wars Destiny. So this was a collectible card game I played I can't remember when, but maybe like 5 years ago or so. I got into it at the very start. Actually, you got me into it. You were like, "Hey, FFG brought out this cool collector card game. It's Star Wars theme. It's got dice. It's got cards. I wasn't
cards
playing
and dice. You love cards and dice.
literally cards and dice. This is what I mean. It's got exactly what I wanted. Right, deck building, cards, and dice. This is
Star Wars.
And Star Wars. I mean, I guess the more I'm talking about it, the more I realize why I actually loved it. Right?
Yeah.
It was such a good game. It was so well developed. I mean, it had its ups and downs. Like, if for anyone who's played collectible card games before, they kind of your meta or your different types of decks that kind of come through as different sets come out, they can go up and down. But for the most part, it was such a good game for being able to play casually because you played cards and then you rolled dice, right? And there was luck mitigation. There was deck building because obviously it had choices. And I think it also had a really good competitive space to it as well. So I played that for pretty much the duration until it got cancelled. I won't go into the discussion of why that happened. But up until it did, and I think it was more just the logistics of kind of running that game. And from what I understand, the actual manufacturing of the dice made it extra hard for FFG to be doing it. Whereas a lot of other collectible card games are just print cards, which is a lot easier than having to do this dice stuff. So, but yeah, I had so much fun with it. It was always really good. And I mean, I know me and you played it a lot, and you dropped off after the first set. But that kind of fun we had, that's what just continued through. Yeah. So it was
because you started to go to meetups and you started to go to tournaments and all of that. I started to see your face popping up on Facebook at for certain stores that were holding little tournaments, and it was a feel good. I'm glad you got a lot of longevity out of it, for the time that it was still running.
Yeah, well, actually, I travelled interstate a couple of times I think once for nationals and once for it's like a galactic thing. I can't remember what it was called, but it was more to like win prizes and stuff. And so met a few cool people. We all travelled up together, and yeah, it was a really cool experience because I hadn't done that when I was younger, and it was cool to be able to find a few people through playing the game that I gelled with really well. And yeah, we had a bit of a trip, and again had a great time. It was really really cool to be able to go there and play, and just have fun with it. So I mean that's probably one of the games in more recent history that I reckon I've really enjoyed. I'd say another game. Look, I'll have to put Twilight Imperium in there. I think just it's probably it's really hard, right? It's kind of like saying Lord of the Rings extended edition trilogy are the best movies ever made. Now, I'm not going to say they are, right? Because but when you have 13 hours of movie, it's usually there's gonna be cool stuff in there, right? Like you can do so much more in that time than you can in, say, a 90-minute or 2-hour movie. It's same with Twilight Imperium, right? Like I've played maybe half a dozen games thereabouts, and all of them there have been really cool parts too. There's been lulls, but that's what most games have. And even though they goes for ages, there's always a really good experience through it. And I think the way that all the mechanics and that come together, it really amplifies or kind of puts the magnifying glass, right? Like really expands on what I'm talking about when I'm saying the player interaction, because that game is something that there is combat in. Okay, I think the combat is fine. I don't think it's amazing, but I definitely don't think that it gets in the way of the game. But there's so many other levels that you can interact with each as players, and that's it. Playing that game just opened up my mind to other games of going like, wow, like how else could you implement those type of trade mechanics and player interactions which don't require rules?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I know what you mean. You start looking at other games and go, why can't that be like that? In the different ways that they've... No, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And so I think, like, going back to when I mentioned Catan, I think that's one of the things that is really, really cool about Catan and sucked me in and makes it such a gateway game for people is that it's so simple, but a lot of the game is about interacting with everyone else. Like, roll a dice and get cards, right? That's literally the game, and then you trade cards in to build stuff. Like, you can explain the game, how the rules to the game to someone in, like, 2 minutes. But the depth of the game comes out of never getting what you want, right? Like, it's impossible. I'd hate to play with a group that never traded, because the game wouldn't work. It's not fun.
No.
As soon as you add the trading element into it, and everyone just kind of going like, yeah, sure, like, 2 sheep for a wood, that sounds great. Here, I'll have a joke about, needing wood, or getting wood, or wanting sheep, right? Like, these are the things that make the game so much fun, and that's the kind of element that I think TI brings, but in a massive kind of really kind of heavy and serious game.
Yeah.
And I guess from a last game, like, probably one of the more casual games that I really like, which is probably a lot lighter, is it Scapegoat? Yeah, Scapegoat. So it's for a social deduction game. I think it's one of those ones that I think the reason I enjoy it so much is that it's a game that everyone can enjoy. I know, like, for yourself, and I don't want to dive too much into you or tell people too much about you, but I know that social deduction games you kind of have a love-hate relationship with, because you really love the idea about them. But I know for a lot of people with those, they don't like lying. They get kind of a bit nervous if they have to do anything too dodgy. Yeah. Whereas Scapegoat completely removes that, right? Like, it goes, you think you're telling the truth until the end, and then you realize that everyone else is actually very different to you, and you realize that you need to do something about it. And just from an interaction perspective, again, I think it works amazingly, because it doesn't rely so heavily on skill, lying, manipulation. It's literally like, play what you think is right, because that's the only information you're given, and then slowly try to work out the fact that everyone else also believes the same thing.
Yeah, it's a really, really clever take on a trader mechanic where everyone's the trader. And like it does the best job of bringing out like paranoia, because you spend the whole time going, that's the scapegoat, that's the betrayer. Wait a second, it could be me. And you just get torn between that. Like you said, I don't like social deduction games, but it's one that I can definitely enjoy and play, because I don't feel that pressure.
Yeah, and just to be a bit cheeky and add an honourable mention in there to my top 3, so one that probably also jumps in, it's a bit heavier, is Battlestar Galactica, it's a BSG, and then now Unfathomable, which is the remake of that, which I won't talk too much about, but just the first time I played that game was the first time I played something with a trader element in it, and I think it was probably one of the earlier ones that had that kind of element. It just felt so good with the right group, and the way that you go forward with that, and it works the same in Unfathomable, where it's everyone working together, trying to beat the deck, trying to beat the computer, or the AI, essentially, and then someone's trying to mess your shit up, right? Like, it just has a really, really cool balance. And again, it's got that narrative that you kind of go through the game, and there's just really cool moments, and that's the stuff that I think I enjoy and sticks in my mind.
Yeah, and were you the Cylon for your first game?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't Cylon for my first game, so I got to just sit there But that's the kind of game that, and this is why I think with those narrative type games, like, I played BSG, like for over 10 years ago, I reckon it was. It must have been, if not 10 years ago, around that. It was a long time ago, and I still remember key moments in multiple of those games, like key things that happened, and like, oh my god, I can't believe this series of events happened and these people made these decisions and then it ended up being this way, right? And that's the kind of stuff that I think from gaming really sticks with me. That's why, right? I don't remember really anything of any of my games of Catan, so I had fun playing it, but you know what I mean. But I still remember, out of the half a dozen games of BSG I play, I still remember multiple moments that happened in those games, which that kind of just talks to kind of how cool and how invested in the game you get.
Yeah, that's like me with TI. Like, I remember all the games that we played and key moments that happened in them, what people were playing, and exactly how it unfolded. It just creates those memories. They're real event games. Shit talk or super best friends behavior?
You mean like
around a table?
Oh,
do you prefer that to be banter and straight down each other's throats, or do you like a caring, hey, go team environment?
Oh, I'm a pretty positive person these days, but I think the banter is fun. I think with the right group, right? Like, that's what it all ends up being. And not honestly, not to be too sappy, but I think that's the balance we've got with our group and why it's so enjoyable to play, because there's so much banter, there's so many jokes, we give each other so much shit, but at the same time, we also tend to err on the side of not being a dick, right?
Yeah.
Like it's very rare for people to do really kind of backstabby dickish moves, unless it's for the game. Right? Like, if it's a move for the game, then done, then it's kind of like, oh, didn't see that coming. But it's usually not early, mid, for no particular reason other than like, nah, I just don't want to deal with you anymore.
No, that's fair enough. And then lastly, on you, the things about you, what's your most disliked game and why? That you've played?
I played something recently and I just did not enjoy it. I can't remember what it was.
Was it with me?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, God.
I think so. It was just something that I just didn't gel with me. So
How recently?
I don't know, actually. I just as soon as you asked that, it triggered something in that. I got to the end of the game. I was like, yeah, just not feeling that. So, but I don't know. I think, like, I mean, the joke is terraforming Mars, right? Like, and we won't go down that path. But for the record, I do really enjoy playing that one. I just
saw 15 viewers leave.
Yeah, I do really enjoy playing that game. I just never want to, and then I have fun. So I don't know. I can't think. I wouldn't. I don't play games I don't like.
Yeah.
Right. Like
Okay.
that's it. And to be honest,
That's fair.
your collection of games is like the kind of top 1% of games that exist. So I don't think we ever play the games that are just really poorly designed.
Oh, okay, I agree with you. But, I mean, we've played games that in my own collection that I don't like.
Oh, yeah, I know. One of those comes to mind as well. So I know if you were to say which game is your most unliked game, I know what the answer would be. But I don't know. I don't think I've really come across something that I've just gone, nah, I just never want to play that again.
All right. I'll play Talisman at Geminate.
Oh, Talisman, yes. Okay, done. There you go. Okay, so apologise for anybody who enjoys Talisman. And from a casual, let's just roll some dice, move around the board, I think it's fine. Maybe with 2 people, so that the game doesn't go for 8 hours, right? Because I play Snakes and Ladders with my kids, and that's what Talisman felt like. It felt like I was playing Snakes and Ladders for 8 hours. I was like, I'm not really making any decisions here. Like, I'm watching the game, and not only just watching the game, I'm watching 6 other people also watch the game. So,
Gaz, it's Star Wars and it's got dice because we played Star Wars Talisman. Doesn't that win it back for you?
no, it doesn't. That's what made me want to play it. I'd never played Talisman, and I was like, yes, totally, this will be great. It's Star Wars, it's dice. How could this be bad? And it just was. Like, it just was not an enjoyable experience after the first 30 to 45 minutes.
Completely fair. Like, I think it was a unified decision, feeling. It was so much that we crowned the undisputed game champion, that we have a belt, like a wrestling, boxing belt. We crowned the very first champion as the winner of that game because it was so painful to get through.
Yeah, I think you know that a game, everyone's overplaying a game, right? Like, you know that it's gone for too long. Not the right amount of time, but too long, when people are rooting for one person to win. In a only one winner type game, and there's like 8 people playing it, when people are hoping that someone wins so that they can stop playing it, yes. It's a red flag that the game has gone too long.
No, I mean, that's completely fair. Look, if I get drunk enough, I'll definitely engage in another game of Talisman. Will, Mangy, let's go. All right, let's talk about some Frosthaven stuff. So, what was your thought process when we began this campaign, when it came to choosing your character off the bat in Frosthaven?
It was bugs.
That was legit.
It looked like
the only thing.
Yeah, I looked at the pictures. Actually,
now, below the pictures.
Wait, I don't even think I looked at all the pictures. I think this was the first one that I looked at, and I was, that's the one I'm going.
Oh, interesting. Because, like, it had a complexity rating as well for all of them, right?
Yeah, I hadn't seen the card, because you asked us on Discord, I think, leading up to. I think you were like, hey, what's the, these are the classes we can kind of pick. And
that makes sense.
I had not, because I think I mentioned this to start with, because I didn't actually ever think that Frosthaven was going to come out. I never looked into it. So I know a lot of people were eagerly awaiting, had ideas about different mechanics, things going on. And I was just like, oh, wow, it exists, really? Oh, that's a surprise. And then you're like, yeah, we're playing on Monday. I was like, oh, okay. Better pick a class then, I guess. And then
Yeah.
you put the list up. I'm actually just trying to find out. Yeah, you were like, hey, this is what it is. I was like, oh yeah, Geminate, let's go. Before I looked at the card at all.
All right, well, that leads me into question number 2. How was the learning curve? And what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, it was the first couple of scenarios. It was, yeah, a lot of learning. And it was trying to take what I knew of Gloomhaven, and I'm still playing Gloomhaven, so I didn't have the 3 or 4 year break that some people had. I'm still playing online at the moment, and so it was putting those ideas into how I'm going to play this class. And so it was tricky because it plays very differently, and not just about the mechanics of the switching and stuff like that, but just the way you manage your cards, right? The only way you get XP really is by burnt cards, and all of your big things are burnt cards, but you've got heaps more cards. That's pretty much different to every other class I played in Gloomhaven, where you need to play conservatively, essentially, and then you use a burn card when it all lines up and it's a really good use of it. This is more, you've just kind of got to use them on every other turn.
Yeah.
Not as a rule, but as a general idea, that's kind of how the class is built.
Yeah, so you weren't really obviously playing that for the first couple of scenarios. You were playing a lot more conservative, and then it kind of just evolved into that when you realize, hey, I'm not getting XP. How do I do that? It looks like I may have to start throwing cards out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we worked it out on when we played last. We looked, I think I'm like 30 XP behind everyone.
You are. We're all neck and neck.
Yeah.
At exactly the same XP, and Gaz is literally about 30 behind.
Yeah. And I think that's just, again, it's just due to, I think, in a couple of scenarios, not getting through enough cards that kind of caused that. And one would be the first scenario that I did, and another one was one that ended a lot quicker than we thought it was going to. When I was trying to play the, first few turns I will play conservative, and then I'll kind of dump my hand. And then it kind of, first few turns went through, I'm like, oh god, this is going to end in a couple of turns. So it was just this mad rush to get rid of as many cards as I could.
Yeah. So what is your general, I guess, play style now with the Geminate?
What I try to do is put up a couple of buffs, and so the damage one and or the tanking one, and that way that allows me to be really, really flexible and either pump out the damage or kind of do a bit of tanking. So but the last few scenarios have really gone like no prep. And if you've listened to the last few, you would know that we keep going on about no prep scenarios. So it's been a bit more challenging from that perspective. And I've just been trying to work out different combos because there's a few different elements to it. And I think this is one of the things that we'll probably expand on a little bit is I'll say the hoops that you've got to jump through to make the character do things, right? And one of them is the shifting between forms, so either being in range form or melee form, and that's its own little puzzle, which I think I'm getting a lot better at. There's been a couple of times where I've gone like, I don't have the right cards here, got to do a short rest to get my cards back or a long rest so that I can shift. But I haven't really found myself outside of being right at the end of the scenario where I've only got like 4 or 5 cards left in a tight situation. That one's manageable. The one that I'm still getting my head around, and I think this is the kind of puzzle now I'm trying to solve, is the elements.
Okay.
Because one of the things with most of the cards is that there is an element requirement, and it uses, I think we looked in the back of the cards, right? Like on the back of the Drifter, it's like elements it uses, none. And then I look on the back of mine, and it's like elements it uses, and it's basically all of them except for grass and dark. And the two that our other 2 characters, the Bone Shaper and the Deathwalker, use are grass and dark. So the challenge is, this is the piece of the puzzle that I'm figuring out, is how to get the elements I want at the right times, because most of my cards don't generate elements. And the ones that do are burn cards.
So it's almost like an RNG reliance on what mobs and the elements they're going to generate to perhaps, with the right timing, assist you with your element issues.
A little bit. Now, the people who have played the Geminate will know this, in that, and I'm only talking about the starter cards here, so just for anybody listening who's played it and is kind of like, oh no, but this card does everything you want it, you're trying to say that it doesn't do. I'm looking at, I think I just hit 4 So I just got a new card. And so what I'm talking about is the starter cards plus a couple of the level 2 and 3 cards. There is 2 consistent buffs that you can put on that allow you to eat any element and turn it into one of the elements you want. And that's kind of the path to getting what you want. But it still requires someone else to generate an element.
Yeah, okay.
So I think that's the puzzle part I'm trying to work out is, because they're actually on some decent cards.
Yeah.
So putting these persistent cards out and going like, oh, well, now I don't have the other half of that card to use at all.
Yeah, so that's a pretty tough choice from the get-go. And of course, the other issue is you do have 2 other players right now that are generating the elements, but they're also eating the elements that they're generating for their own abilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Which doesn't leave a lot of space for you, and I'm not really doing anything to help.
Yeah. Look, I think that the way it works in my mind in Magical Christmas Land is that I put these buffs up, and then when the enemies generate an element that they will generally want to use, I can eat it and turn it into something that they don't want, and I can use it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of the way I see it. It's not going to be an every turn thing. I think the part that makes it a little bit trickier is, and this is the hoops, the term jumping through hoops that I find, and this is the part I'm still struggling with a little bit to kind of really get that engine going. And I think it's happened. It's worked well in a couple of scenarios, and a couple I've just completely dropped the bundle on, is getting into the right form at the right time, having the right cards, and then having the right element to boost the card that I've got to make it really good. And I think that's probably where one of the parts I'm struggling with a little bit is that a lot of the burn cards or the good cards require an element in order for you to do something. So it's just that extra kind of planets aligning thing that I'm not getting right. And, that's the puzzle I'm solving at the moment.
What do you actually love about the Geminate? What is something you absolutely love about it?
Look, I actually quite like the shifting thing. I think it's a really cool mechanic. I quite like that it does have a lot of cards, so there's usually a lot of options. I've talked a couple of times about, one of the things about the Gloomhaven, Frosthaven way that the kind of game plays, right, is that you have so many decisions, and this is just even more, right? There is just so many more things to plan. So I generally find that in most situations, especially early on, I've kind of got something I can do based on where everybody is. So I quite like that shifting piece. And I do still like the little puzzle of figuring out ranges, as much as it is a pain in the ass, right? I do quite like the idea because it kind of gives you that cool, I just solved a puzzle feeling, right? Like when you can manage to hit something in range 2 or 3 or 3 or 4, whatever it is, and it actually works, and then they get pushed and they go into this thing. You're like, yes, haha, I figured out that little puzzle. That's cool. So I quite like that part, and it does have the extra hoops to jump through make it a bit more rewarding when you get it. Okay. So I like that. And I mean, from playing classes in Gloomhaven that were a lot more straightforward, there were classes that I played where I was just like, like I played the Doomstalker in Gloomhaven semi-recently, and that was really cool because I just got to kill everything all the time. But it wasn't really that tricky. Every turn it was just like doom something and then do a really big range attack, right? Like, so you, like, massive damage, right? But it wasn't all that hard, and it kind of, after a few scenarios, wasn't really fulfilling. It was just like, oh, I guess I'll just kill that one and that one and that one.
Yeah. What are your absolute must bring every single time cards?
Oh god, I don't know. I think the buff cards that do the plus to damage and the plus to tanking, absolutely, they have to be there. So names of cards.
No, Geminate people will generally understand what you're talking about already from the get-go. And my observations as a player who plays with you is something I've noticed is that if I'm not in the front line taking a lot of damage and mitigating and doing all the tanking stuff, it's generally you, right? So I don't know how the Geminate plays, but I do see the amount of times that Gaz gets hit, Gaz, reduces the damage by this amount. Oh, wow, he's actually doing all right. He can actually hold himself up, right? Yeah, your health drops dangerously low sometimes, but you're managing to do that a lot, and I'm understanding now it's because of these persistent cards, right?
Yeah, I mean, they don't have it's not the ability that you have to be able to like then remove your little token up so you can do it again. So you kind of really only get like 4 goes at it. But
Right.
shield 2 on your next 4 attacks, again, assuming you're in the right form to make that worthwhile, is pretty good. I mean, that's negating 8 damage. So there are usually times where I can see and I go, I'm going to go in, I'm going to tank, right? And then you can combine that with other cards that they've got for the tanking. So I guess the other cards must have 4 cards that I like playing, rather than just the ones that like I feel like you have to take. Is there? I mean, the joke is I'm going to wound everybody, which I'll talk about. We'll talk about in a minute. I actually quite like it's the smoldering hatred one, which basically is just like a basic attack that. But I can give myself muddle to add 2 to the attack, or I can give myself curse to make it a 2 AoE. I find I use that a little bit, and that's quite good. But I don't know. This is probably one of the things. It's not a problem, and it's not a benefit. But all of the cards are so different.
Yeah.
That there isn't really any standout of like, oh well, this is just an awesome card, because they all the cards have half of it or a burn card.
That's really good to hear that they've got that kind of flexibility with a lot of cards that straight to your mind, there's not some that you just bring every single time and some that you necessarily don't. Like playing the Drifter, you're crushing weight and you're continuous health, and, some of these cards, they're must brings, right? And there are a couple of cards that I have yet to bring. And there's one that I've only brought once, it's a lost card with some cleave and AoE. That's because I'm still bringing some heals and all that. But I already know that there's, set cards that I'll bring every single time without fail, and then others that just get left at home and they're super situational. And I still need a very compelling argument to whether or not I need to bring them. But if you're not really struggling with that as much, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I think there's probably a couple that I haven't really brought. Like there's one that gives me a.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Is there any that you don't really bring at all?
I think there's one that is a loot card, and I generally don't take loot cards just in as a rule in character classes unless the other half of the card is super useful, because
Same with me.
I feel like I'm not that concerned with looting. Someone else can loot, and it's not a really big part of the game unless it's based around the character. Although there have been characters I've played in Gloomhaven have like a loot too. Those ones are juicy. Like it's like basically like a vacuum cleaner, right? You just suck everything up.
Yeah, black hole.
So there's that one, which is then the top is a persistent buff, which is basically just allows you to shift when you kill things. So I haven't really taken that one, which it's probably more that having more that's be the have a persistent out or have a loot. So for most part, that's going to be a dead card.
Yeah, okay.
And the persistent doesn't seem like it's going to go off that often, so it's not a like, oh well, it's fine because you're going to do it all the time.
Is that due to Geminate damage not being considered to be universally, on average, quite high?
Yeah, I find that. I'd be interested to see what other people think. And again, this is not going into later cards. Most of the damages sit around 2 or 3, which is okay. But when you start factoring in things like shields and the fact that the modifier deck is quite bad, right? Like it has a lot of -1s and 0s in there, so you're probably not buffing that up all that much. And again, caveat, this is super early, so I haven't modified the crap out of the deck. You're probably hitting for 2s and 3s mostly, unless you're using a burn card, right?
Yeah.
And then with a burn, they do have like a 5 or a 6. And some of those are bigger ones, especially if you can add elements into it. But it just doesn't seem like it's pretty situational of like, if you kill it, then you can shift. It's going to be hard to pull off.
Yeah, I think with the exception of maybe our Bone Shaper, who can target multiple things in the one go, like get multiple swings from all the creatures, you are probably the most multi-targeted class that we have with us, which is kind of the drawback of not being able to hit necessarily super hard consistently, but you're consistently able to pepper and do a lot of status effects, including on us.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, and that's why I think I'm really being careful to not make it sound like it's a complaint that it doesn't do a lot of damage. It does, because I think, as we've seen in the damage meters, we look at the end of it, and most of it, unless I've completely stuffed it up, I tend to be around the mark anyway. Because you're right, it's 2, but it's 2 to 2 characters, right? So I am hitting for 4, and even on a +1 -1 type thing, I average out. So yeah, it still does do damage. It's, it's got a heal. It does a decent amount of status effects, and some of the cards that I'm getting as I level up are just kind of leaning into that a little bit more, which is good. But it's one of the things that I've found to be, and this is just pure luck. It's happened twice now. The 100% chance to miss. So I think we'll talk about this probably more when we go through our scenario that we've just did. But I got I think it's a level 3 card, it must be. And it's a 6 attack. And if...
A lost card.
Yes, it's a lost card. And the 2 times that I've used it now, right, in the 2 scenarios since I've got it, the first time, pulled my miss. The second time, pulled my miss. Now, luckily, I had advantage the second time, because one of the things is if I eat light, it gives me advantage on the attack. Obviously, a really, really important thing if you get a 100% chance to pull a miss. So I pulled that and then drew. So I didn't actually miss on it. But
no, but it does 100% of the time pull a miss card.
Yes, correct. 100% of the time, it's a miss. So
okay.
And but that's it. And that card is a really good example of kind of the trade-offs that I'm finding I need to do. In that the top of that card is a big attack and it's a loss, right? Which is fine. That's what a lost card should do. The bottom, though, is gain advantage on all your attacks this round, and they gain PS2, right? And that's like for that round. So it's a really good card to hold on to. It only works with range, because you've got to be in range form, but it can be really, really powerful, because having advantage is great, especially if you can just give it to yourself. But then once you do that big attack, so that's the kind of card that is really tricky. Like I think that's a really good card. Some of the other cards don't have that, right? And that some of the base cards kind of have the burn component is quite good. The other component part of it, which is not burn, is kind of meh. So it's cool because you can burn it and you don't care. But it also just means if you don't want to burn a card every turn, then you're kind of looking going like, a lot of the things I'm doing are kind of mediocre.
Yeah, okay. So we are now 9 scenarios in. Where is the Geminate sitting for you?
I feel like it's cool. It's got some interesting quirks to it. It just seems to... like, it's trying to do...
Because we were talking about this. We were talking about this at the end of the episode, and you were mentioning a little bit kind of where you're, like, not too sure where you're at now.
Yeah, I think I'm enjoying playing it, and I'm enjoying the challenge of playing it. So it's not the complexity. It's the variance in all the different cards, and I think that I said that was one of the positives of it, because you always got stuff to do. But I'm finding that there's turns that it's just trying to figure out so much. Maybe I am just like, I want to play something simpler. I'm like, oh, hey, there's a monster. I'll just like play this card and do heaps of damage to it. So maybe I need a bit of a palate cleanser like that. So yeah, I think the part where I'm at is I still am really enjoying it. And I think the comment I made when we were talking about it is, look, in another couple of levels, if I'm not seeing like kind of that, not just the power level, but the interest in the types of cards I'm getting kind of shift a little bit, then I would consider kind of pushing to go down my retirement goal, or even just creating a new character and kind of shelving this for a little bit and then coming back to it. So yeah, I'm hoping that the cards do, and I'm not going to say get more interesting, because I think as we've established, every time I get a new card, I always show you the 2 cards and go, hey, look at like the 85 symbols across these cards.
Well, you generally hand it over to me and go, what do you think this means? And then I look at it and continue to look at it and then continue to look at it. And then I raise an eyebrow and I sort of hand it back to you and said, no idea.
Yeah, so it's not through lack of interest in the leveling up stuff, but yeah, I think it's I'm struggling a little bit to find a pattern and a groove, and that could be a me thing. So I'd be really interested to hear from people who have played the Geminate, whether you've played a little bit or you're further along than me, and just how you found it. Not so much about, I mean, if you want to, you can be like, hey, play these cards, these are really good, and this combo worked great. Like, happy for you to share that if you want, but much more how you felt the class play, especially, you know, if you have played Gloomhaven before, and or maybe some of the other Frosthaven classes.
Yeah, okay. No, well, hopefully that, we as we start to hit up, and we're literally one scenario, three of us, one scenario away from hitting level 5.
Yeah.
Which is always, super exciting. I feel like Phil and I just leveled up, so it's kind of funny that we're about to all do it again.
Yeah.
And then that should sort of push you slightly closer to 5, but...
Hopefully I'll be able to... Look, maybe what I'll do for the next 3 scenarios is I'll just make sure I burn every single card that I have, so all 14 cards. That guarantees me at least 14 XP, if not more, plus the scenario XP. I should be able to catch up in 1 or 2 scenarios. So
yeah,
it just means you guys will be doing a 3 character scenarios for the next...
Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
I will say, though, one thing that I'm really looking forward to when we play next is I've just unlocked my True Tick perk, and I feel like that's going to add, it's going to add more complexity to my decisions, but it's also potentially going to give me a bit more freedom. So what it does is when I play a burn card, I can discard a card to return a card from my discard pile to my hand.
Oh.
So it means that I'll be able to, it's almost like a little bit of a get out of jail free. Like I think I've talked to you before about I've had to play unoptimally because I need to keep my shift card for my next turn. Otherwise I'll get stuck and I'll need to rest. It's going to allow me to get out of those situations a little bit, but it's also going to allow me to do things like heal twice in a turn. Well, not twice in a turn, sorry, but turn heal and then heal again the next turn. Or on any of my cards that aren't burns, that I can get back, there could be situations I can line up and actually sit there and kind of stay at range and just kind of fire off a couple of times. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to... I mean, I like mechanics and I like extra decisions, so I'm looking forward to that being an extra little bit of a, hang on, I can... Yes, if I play this burn card, and then what it means I can discard this and pick this up, and then next turn I'll be able to do that. So, again, it's just... Yeah, adding more Fort HS to my current Fort HS.
That's right. Well, it sounds already way more exciting than my double perk thing, because mine is literally when I decide to take a long rest, I can move one of my persistent tokens back 1 space.
Well, I mean, that's 2 damage on crushing weight, isn't it? Shouldn't that just say when you next take your next long rest, crushing weight moves back 1 space?
Look, I'm just saying I haven't picked it. I'm not picking it anytime soon. I mean, lately in a lot of the scenarios we've been playing, I haven't even been able to take a long rest. It's just been go, 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 no prep, go, 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 no prep, go, go, go.
I found that, yeah, no, it's interesting. I found that too. Like, I think the last scenario I did take a long rest, and that was just purely my positioning. Oh no, when I'm far enough back, I have almost run out of cards. I need to shift. I knew I needed to shift, and that I can shift at the end of a long rest. And so I think I still had a few cards left, but I was like, I'm just going to do it now.
Yeah, well, the scenario we played this week didn't have a timer. So we all actually had a long rest. There was a bit where we were all in the corridor going, hey, this is nice.
Yep.
I'm announcing long rest. Calvin had like 5 because he was like delaying. But that's for the actual chat about that episode scenario. I have a really random final question. If you could design a character around a concept, what would it be?
I'm thinking about those variants that we were talking about. I love the one where if you overheal people, they get to move. Oh, yeah. I'd love a character that was based around overhealing or doing something like that gave people different buffs. So, like heal 4, if this makes the character go above their maximum hit points, they gain advantage, right? Or they gave strength, or little things like that. Like it would be cool to have a heal character that's supporting, that allows to provide different buffs, but again has an extra hoop to jump through, not just give strengthen, give bless, little perks like that.
Like, gives you reasons to overheal and plan your healing, despite you're not just topping people up, you're trying to push them above a threshold to then gain an extra advantage that, could push the swing of the tides of battle.
Yeah, exactly. Or things like, I'm just making stuff up now, but, AoE around you, heal all allies, next to you, 1. If you heal more than 2 allies or 2 or more allies, then they gain bless. So it's, again, allowing you to think less about just using heal to heal people, but going like, how do I maximize the mechanic of healing to buff people and provide the extra benefits?
Yeah, you could really go really interesting with it, because I don't know, I haven't seen all the classes in Gloomhaven, and look, this seems kind of basic, and maybe it's been done, but I'm imagining an overheal situation where if you heal over 3, then it's 3 damage to something within range 2.
Yeah.
You know, like, it kind of just transfers it over in a way, so a little bit like a Shadow Priest or something like that. It'd be really interesting.
Yeah, stuff like that I think would be cool, having a damage output through a healer class as well. So yeah, again, it could be heal 2, deal 2 damage to an adjacent target. You know, you have those pure damage kind of come through in a support class. So yeah, I think if you're gonna base a class around healing, I think having extra stuff to do with the heals would be cool.
Yeah, I think if I was to do one, I'd do one around resting, and like take a long rest. At the end of your long rest, deal 6 damage at range 3, or something like that. But just rest your whole way through. You'd just be lethargy through the whole scenario.
You'd never get to use it though. They're all like we're on a clock. It's like finish this scenario in 5 turns, otherwise everything dies.
Yeah. Well, I'll work on my idea. Thank you so much for sitting with me and having a bit of a chat. I hope everyone got a chance to see into the Gaz window a little bit, and maybe enjoy your chat about your Geminate and how you're going with that. I think it's a class that maybe is either being represented in a lot of people who are just starting Frosthaven, or maybe being avoided due to its reputation as being a more complex character. And I'm, looking forward to hearing about more people tackling it, because it sounds like a relatively challenging yet rewarding class.
Yeah, I definitely think that if you do enjoy just trying to figure out things a little bit and then getting that payoff, like again that small little puzzle aspect of playing games, it is a good one for that. I would say though, don't be scared off by the complexity rating, because I don't think it's a class that is like, oh, you have to figure all these things out, otherwise you just can't play. Like, I was worried when I first read it that I'm like, oh, I really have to get this right, otherwise I'm getting exhausted turn 2 and then everyone's going to hate me. It's not like that at all, right? Like, it pretty clearly lays out, based on the starting cards, what you can and can't do. And I think it's just about optimizing. That's the thing. So if you want to play something with a few more options where you've got a lot of cards and you kind of have to make those decisions, I think it's worth giving it a go. And I mean, the beauty about the Frosthaven system is that if you play it for 2 or 3 scenarios and you just really don't like it, then you just make another character. Yeah. Like, yeah, it sucks because you'll be behind everyone a little bit, but like that's better in a long game, the option of being able to do that, than it is being like, oh, well, I guess I'm stuck with it until I can force retire it.
Yeah. No, that's true. Someone was suggesting, actually, a variant where you play the game with 5 people and 2 people control the different parts of the Geminate. Is that doable?
That would be weird. So they control different parts, so you have 7 cards each and you just play.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Why not? So, yeah, it's but yeah, definitely. And if anybody has any experiences, like hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, email, Reddit, the different ways people have been communicating this. I think all the links are in the show notes. And yeah, just throw out there, like, what's been some cool stuff that you've done with the Geminate. If you have played it or haven't played it, what you're looking forward to, or, what did you like or dislike? And just, again, be really interested to know, because I don't want to dive into the community because I don't want spoilers. So I'm kind of like, in my world, I'm the only person that's played this. Right, so it'd be really interesting.
That's really interesting.
It'd be really interesting, yeah. And I mean, I know you guys are the same with the Drifter and all that stuff. I know you're not doing heaps of research on it, so it'd be really cool to hear from people, just to be like, yeah, I felt the same, or I think you might be missing something here. Like, don't tell me how to play it, but just give me your thoughts and experiences, because it'd be cool to know where you sit and where I kind of sit in regards to the experience.
Yeah, and if people like contact us regarding this, and maybe give us something else to something for you to bring up, in a future, like if you get some interesting take on the Geminate and you actually put that into play and learn something about it, give you something to talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thanks again for joining us on our milestone episode. We're 10 in and we're going strong. We're going to hit 1,030. That's my goal for now.
What, episodes?
Yes.
I don't know if we have that many scenarios. Are we going to replay 3 times? That's right. We're going to replay on hardcore mode after we finish it, aren't we?
Yeah. Definitely. And then we've got the PC version as well. We'll just narrow the episodes down. So it's like this week, the road event. Next week, the scenario setup. Thanks again for everyone for joining us. I've been Detty, and I've been interviewing Gaz.
And remember, when it comes to rolling terribly,
it's all on the wrist.